Hey there, I'm Stan Baker, one of your hosts for the podcast Circle Forum. In this week's podcast, Shelley Steele, Steve Young, and I discuss the importance of knowing your why. The COVID pandemic has everyone re examining their lives and looking for meaning and purpose in their lives and in their work. And what's really interesting to me is that when you know your why, your how and your what become more impactful. It's important because otherwise you're probably just going through the motions of a day to day existence. So if you've ever wondered, what's my purpose here? Or why am I doing this particular job? This podcast is for you. To give you a heads up, and it's probably no big surprise, but it's going to take some time to step back to reflect in the middle of a very hectic day or week or busy life. Restorative practices offers the opportunity to work through your purpose, through your why, by using a fair process. Thirdly, making reflective conversations part of regular staff meetings is easy to do and very important. Want to find out more about restorative practices? Check out our website, www.restorative.ca. Drop me an email to stan@restorative.ca. Let's join the conversation already in progress with Shelley, Steve, and me, Stan. One of the things that comes up in our training an awful lot is the idea of knowing your why. That is, what is the reason behind you're doing what you're doing? Maybe you could just explain. We can talk a little bit about what is that why all about?
For me, when I think about my why, it's beyond my profession, and often that's where people go as to why they're doing the work they're doing. For me, you need to go deeper than that. Is my why of how I move through this world? What do I believe about people? How do I believe about how the world functions? Because then that will drive my work, that will drive my community connections, that will drive my hobbies, whatever that is. It's deeper than our work, and just looking at your work itself it's a kind of a safer way to go and talk about kids and students and so I encourage people to, when they're thinking about their why, to go step outside the classroom or the school and think about your why as a person.
I see within the teaching profession for years. I mean, we're all in the schools for years and years and years. And we talked about what motivates people. Why did you want to get into teaching? And for some people, it was a nice job. Hey, it's a great job. I get my summers off and I get well paid. But the difference between a job and a career or a calling is the difference between just doing your job versus I know my why. My why makes it my calling. When I understand why I got into this, that I'm here because of, I want to work with kids because I know I can make an impact, I can make a difference, and I'm going to do the extra things that help me do that. That's my why. And so, we started talking about this because we go back to the video that we show at a lot of our trainings of know your why. That when you know your why, your actions become more impactful and you tend to do things at a deeper level, and you maybe work a little harder and put the extras into your lessons, or you follow up with that kid that's been missing assignments by calling home and stuff. Your job doesn't say you have to do that, but your why tells you you have to do that. And so when we know our why, we become better at our job. And so, lately a lot of people are debating, why am I working so hard as a teacher when nobody seems to care? And why am I doing all the extras when the guy down the hallway is getting paid the exact same money as I am, and he's part of the 320 track club and never does the extra stuff. So why am I doing it? So a lot of people throughout their career weigh that and mull that over. But you really got to
And
know
it,
why you got into this business in the first place.
it is interesting, right? Because everybody looks at other people's jobs or their actions through their own why too. I can remember as a child and youth counselor at schools, people saying to me, why don't you just go back to school for one more year and you could be a teacher? That's not what I wanna do, right? Yeah, I know I make a lot less money than you, I don't have some of the things but that's not what my why is about, right? I love to be around kids and I love to teach, but in a different way too.
Well, and I think that why really gives you that sense of purpose and meaning. And I think if there's anything that people are looking for right now in their lives, never mind in their and I loved how you kind of distinguished that, Shelley, like you said, go a little deeper than just the function of your work. What's the purpose behind, like, is just showing up for your job and getting paid? Is that all there is? Like, is that the purpose? You're just doing this for the money and for the vacation? Or like, what's the deeper reason that will drive what it is that you're doing? And I'm wondering then, what are some examples of a deeper level of understanding of a why, maybe even just personally?
Well, I think for me, I mean, a very simplified one would be that I do believe, given opportunity, people can make change. And that's very simplified, but I mean, your why doesn't have to be complicated either. It's just where you operate from. So if was a why that I didn't believe that whatever you're dealt, and there's no option for change, then I shouldn't be doing the kind of work that I was doing, right? You have to believe, you have to have a why that connects, and that, as again I said, that will demonstrate by your actions and how you move through the world and connect with people.
And I think with that, then it's it's not just that people can change, but I can change, right?
Right,
In
right.
facing certain circumstances, if people can change, then I need to know that I can also change when I'm encountering situations that are new or difficult or challenging or outside of what I'm used to.
Right, that we always can learn.
And I think for me, my why kind of changed over time, but essentially because of the types of schools I worked in as a teacher first and then as an administrator, um, recognize that although academics are important, they aren't everything. And that there's a greater reason for schools other than just to pound away a curriculum and produce academic excellence, which was probably in contravention to what a lot of my superintendents were trying to get me to do. But I firmly believed always did is that there was more to school than just academics, that we had to provide a place where kids wanted to be, that there had to be something going on there that drew them into the school every day. And while academics were important for some, they weren't important for as important for everybody, that there were other reasons. So that's why I coached teams and I ran intramural programs and did all those extra things and built Santa Claus parade floats and all those extracurricular things that we know are helpful. And I didn't just do it because I like to do it. I did it because I knew that there was a purpose for all that. That for some kids, showing up every day for volleyball practice is what got them into school and kept them in school because they were good at athletics or they're good at band or they were good at art or whatever it was. And I think a lot of people out there agree with that. And so my why was always trying to provide that whole school approach to developing a child. And so that's why restorative hit me so well because it talks about developing the whole child and those relationships and the things that kids want to be. They want to be friends with their teacher and they want to like their teacher and they want to have those casual conversations during lunchtime and stuff like that because those are the things that interest kids. A lot of that used to happen during intramurals and sports and at clubs, and we just don't do it anymore. So now we have to do it in a different way.
Your why is that everybody has value. Every kid
Exactly.
has value, right? That is now I'm saying what I'm hearing, but that sounds like where it doesn't matter. There's all sorts of value in every kid or every person.
So let me just take Shelley's push, Steve, to just push you a little deeper and take your why outside of a school context. What difference does your why make in non-school kinds of connections?
Well, it's the same thing. If you look at community, and I'll try to take my politician hat off, or my future politician hat off, but
Or your past
my
politician?
past politician, and maybe my thinking puts me 10 or 15 years behind everybody else's. But I'll be honest, community has been lost and all that kind of stuff as the world has changed and people are working, far greater hours and the two parent family working and all that kind of stuff, that the sense of community has been lost. So developing that sense of community in a small community, I live in a small town, but even in a large city, where are the community centers and what's drawing people out to socialize with other people in their community?
What are some of the structures we've observed that prevent people from realizing their why?
I think we first have to start with having people really think about that question. We don't often take a quiet moment and really be reflective and think about what my why is outside of being in the academic setting. So, what is it? Because once you're clear on what your why is, that helps you with some of the structures that we're going to talk about. but it does help. If you don't know what it is and you're just floundering around and think, I just want to do nice things for kids, that's not really solid. So that doesn't help you navigate through some of those structures.
There used to be a saying when I first went to principal school, there was this saying that if it's academically sound, it's administratively possible. In other words, if you have an idea that is good for kids and it makes sense, we'll figure out a way to make it happen. And I still believe that. And so we just have to really start thinking outside the box and working with the people up ahead of us to say, here's our idea. We know this is good for kids. We know this is what they need. We know it'll work. And we have to somehow put this into place. How can we do it? Now let's think about how we can do it.
It's kind of sounding like fair process again.
Yeah, it does sound
But
like fair
you know,
process. And part of I think uh teachers, let's talk about teachers in particular, not being able to get to their why, is the structure of leadership. The teachers, in effect, by the way they are supervised, are not trusted to actually have the competence to be able to make the decisions that need to be made in the classroom about learning. And so it feels like that high level of control is there, but there's not the corresponding support.
Support.
So the control, you have to have this done, you have to have that done, so there's lots of control, high control, which I think is important. But without the high support, it becomes authoritarian.
Mhm.
And teachers are just weighed down with that burden of expectations without the corresponding support. So part of the structure that I think needs to change is that leadership piece. And now we get into firm and fair and back to fair process again, right?
I think you're right, Stan. There's a fear of making mistakes.
Yeah.
There's, I'm not going to, this would be a great idea. I think I want to try it, but if I try it and it doesn't work, I know I'm going to be roundly criticized by some parents and I'll have to explain this and it's going to make my life miserable. And it's not worth it. And so you're right. There needs to be that support from their administrators, whatever, to say the teacher's trying something new and different and it didn't work 100%, but it's worth trying. And there's always that one parent that says, yeah, but my kid suffered because of it. And here's who I'm suing and I'm calling my lawyer. And so with that always hanging over people's heads, teachers are going, it's not worth trying. It's not worth trying. The attitude or the climate we're in now is always about, if you do something wrong, you're going to pay for it. And you're going to pay for it publicly. And so it's not worth it. I'll just do the simple. I'll just walk down the
Just
middle of
tell
the
me
river.
what to do and I'll
Yeah.
do that.
You tell me what to do and I'll do it because I'm not going to do anything too much. Right.
So one of the things that came up for me a number of times in the board when I was working is, although I was working with restorative practices, often principals would call me in to say, look, there's a teacher that I'm working with that is really struggling in terms of their performance review. Is there something you can do to help? And restorative practices as a last ditch effort. And generally speaking, my first conversation with the individual would be something along the lines of, what is it you're really good at? What is it you love doing? What is it that is a breeze for you as teaching? So for example, if it is in teaching language, then, okay, so what is it about teaching language that you could use as your strength in some of these other areas around classroom management, for example? Or if you're very, very strong in art or in drama, how could you make drama a central part of how you address all these other areas of the curriculum? And if it's classroom management, how can drama become part of that? How can storytelling? And so starting with the strength of the individual, but it takes getting to know them. It takes asking them that question. It takes
Giving them
starting
time to think about it.
and just like with our kids, our students, we want them to work from what they're good at, from their strengths, as opposed to all the deficit, approaches. So part of getting to my why is allowing me the opportunity as a staff member or a teacher, the opportunity to really be able to try, like you said, Steve, to try out these things that are within my area of strength without fear of recrimination and, somebody give me a big lecture in the office or whatever it happens to be. Because then I'm just going to, as one person described it, I'm going to wear beige and duck. right? I just
Right.
don't want to stand out. Just do your job. So practically, in terms of restorative approaches and restorative leadership, what are we saying people can do to help them to get to their why and realize their why?
Well, getting to your why is, unless you're willing to sit and reflect, you're not going to get to your why. But sometimes you need the help of other people to guide
I was
you
just going to say
to
that,
get to
Steve.
your why. So that's why we've always talked about, those. Wouldn't it be nice if we could, during a staff meeting, we could just have a nice little talk session? Let's talk about, why are we all here? Why did we get into this? And through discussion, people, even if they don't participate, if they just listen, they're going to start to think about their own reasons. Why did I start this career path? And what am I getting out of it? And why am I really here? And that's how you get to your why. Not everybody is necessarily self-reflective of their career choices and whatnot until somebody challenges them with it. And then they have to start to think about it.
So
And
put
so
it on
that's
the
the first
agenda
step.
is what you put it on the agenda, like,
Exactly.
and put it at the beginning of the agenda as opposed to all those other business items.
That's right.
Wouldn't that be a great exercise? And almost what you were doing with that staff member, Steve, that in Stan, in pairs, that's a part of the agenda. And it could be just at the beginning of every staff meeting, and you're not going to get to everybody, but you're going to work in pairs. And then a few guiding questions, like, what is it that gets you excited in the classroom? What is it what your strengths are? And just ask the person some of those questions in a very safe way, just the two of you, because that starts the reflection. And we know when people are able to do things that they feel confident about and they're strong about, they light up talking about them. So just giving that opportunity to be in a structured way. And here's some questions you can ask the person who's sharing with you.
3 of my favorite introductory questions are: what's something you're celebrating, something you're planning, or something you've learned? And you can answer any one or all 3. And the conversations and the connections that start to happen, even if it's just a go around at a meeting, can really, really be helpful. And anytime you're getting together with someone, it can just be 2 people to just ask, so what's something you're celebrating, something you're planning, something you've learned? And maybe you don't have something for every one of them every time, but
Right.
you got some conversation going. Everybody has something that they're planning.
So I think just to pick up on the restorative piece and knowing your why from what Steve said, so give people opportunity, but also give them some structure of how to do that. Because if you haven't done that kind of stuff before, or been given the opportunity to take a moment and do that kind of thinking, just like for students, you might need a little structure to move through the steps of the thinking. So not just to tell people to figure out their why and share it, because you're not going to get to those next levels down by doing that. If you watch people when you ask them about some of those things, you will physically, when we say light up, you really do. Your eyes get brighter. You may sit up taller. So you'll know when you're hitting those things that people do feel good about, and that is a strength. So that's a great place to work from. And we don't necessarily know we're doing that, but now we're talking about something that we're passionate about or we're excited about, and we have a physical change as well as our voice changes and all those kind of things. That everybody has value. I just thinking about something I wonder if this would be helpful. I used to use it with teens in particular that, what do you want to do after high school? I don't know. They're really having a hard time seeing the future. And I would say to them, well, what did you used to say when you were little that you wanted to do when you grew up? When people would ask you those questions. And they could come up with that answer, right? And then that would move the conversation forward. So I wonder for adults, it would be the same thing. Think about your 10-year-old self or your 8-year-old. What did you used to tell people you wanted to do in the world or whatever it was? And get them back there before there was all this other stuff and this noise to think about that gets in the way of your why.
I wanted to be a truck driver.
Why did you want to be a truck driver?
Because I could sit up higher than everybody else and see further down the road. And
Okay, see further down the road.
so
Yeah.
then in college and university, that's what I did for my summer job. I drove a truck. I loved it. And surprise of surprise, I now own a truck that I love to drive. I love to drive. I guess it's no surprise that we landed on some restorative practices to help you with your why. A fair process in a restorative context means that there's engagement. Everyone has an opportunity for a voice. There's explanation, That is, there's an understanding of the reasons for whatever decision it is that we're making or where we're going. And there's expectation clarity. We all have a shared understanding of where it is that we're going together. You can learn more about fair process and take advantage of a lot of the free resources we have at www.restorative.ca. Subscribe to our podcast at Circle Forum on YouTube. Drop me a note if you wanted to consult about any of this to stan@restorative.ca. And let's work in purpose by sharing our why with others.